just the ringing in my head. Okay, we are in the midst of a study on Be Ready to Give an Answer. Somebody mentioned to me, I thought I had a couple of them up here. Somebody mentioned to me last week about maybe making 5 or 10 more copies of the book. And I had like 3 left, and I forgot today to make those, which I will work on that. Raise your hand if you don't have a copy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so I think I had 3. If I could find those and make 5 more, I think I'll be good. I'd like to have 3 or 4 left over just in case, because some people may come in that don't have one. If somebody visits, I want to be able to give them one. But anyway, somebody help me remember that, and we'll get those for next week. We talked about some questions about God in Lesson 1. We talked about questions about creation and evolution, and we left off, oh no. I think I got my slides out of order. Well, that's strange. We'll see if we can figure it out. I've figured sometimes when I'm clicking around slides, if I don't, I've caught it just about every time I've done it, but I think I know what I did. But sometimes I'm clicking and I accidentally, it's very sensitive in PowerPoint. You'll drag a slide instead of clicking on one slide and then going and clicking on the other. Sometimes you'll drag a slide to a different order in the presentation. But anyway, we talked about if evolution is wrong, why do so many people believe in it? There could be a number of different reasons. It may be, it could just be pride. It could be a desire to be free from moral responsibility. It may be that someone at one time had faith in a so-called believer and they lost faith in that person. And we emphasize over and over again, that's why we don't put our faith in a person. Put your faith in God. People let us down from time to time because they're people and they make mistakes. And, you know, if somebody's faith is in me, they're going to get let down. And so I don't want someone to have their faith in me. I don't want to have my faith in someone else. But if our faith is in God, then He'll never let us down. That doesn't mean He's going to cater to our every whim. But at the same time, it's understanding that ultimately speaking, God is perfect. God is holy. He's just, and so on. Sometimes people are deceived. They're told every educated person believes in evolution, or you've got to believe in evolution. All the evidence is stacked in favor of evolution. Sometimes people are just deceived, and they, quite honestly, a lot of our young folks have bought it, hook, line, and sinker, in the colleges and the universities and so on. And in their defense, they go many times expecting, well, this is a teacher. Teachers want to help us, and so. And sometimes someone is deceived and then they go and deceive somebody else unintentionally. But at the same time, the evidence is there in favor of creation. Some questions evolution can't answer. This was the last one we covered on Lesson 2. Evolution can't tell you about the origin of the earth, can't tell you about the origin of life. It can't tell you, why there are sometimes differences between creatures, that you would expect to be the most alike. And this is one of those, I wish we had more time, but, it's not the purpose of our study just to go super, super deep into this. But there are some times that scientists have looked and where you would expect the most similarities between kinds, there are the most differences. And sometimes where you would expect the most differences, and sometimes this even goes into DNA study and things like that, sometimes where you would expect there to be the most difference, there are the most similarities, or at least more similarities. And so it doesn't always hold up. Sometimes people will say, well, do you know how similar the DNA of humans is to apes? Well, are there some similarities? Yes. There are a whole lot of differences as well. And so, and understand this, and I'll say this, I'll throw this out there because, evolutionists sometimes don't think about this, or at least won't be honest enough to admit this. A creationist who's a Bible-believing person is honest enough to admit this. A lot of times it's about the interpretation of the data. Okay? What I mean by that is people look at similarities between, like, for instance, a human and an ape. And they say, look at all those similarities. And sometimes they'll even say between a human and another animal. They're so similar. You know what that means? And they say that means they came from the same ancestor, right? A creationist looks at the same exact data, same similarities, if he's honest, but the creationist says, you know what that means? One creator. That's evidence of a singular creator. I use the example sometimes of computer code. If you're writing computer code, and you're smart at least and efficient, you don't sit down and write out every single little command. There are all these, I learned this, what little computer programming I took in college, because I'm not at all good at that. But what little I took, I learned there are websites and sometimes even kind of like a depository or repository for it within a company's intranet sometimes, where they've had other people work on specific codes for specific things, but it may be part of a bigger picture. You're working on this big, robust program that's going to do all these different things, but here's one little thing that you need it to do. Well, John Doe did that 6 months ago in another program that he was working on, but within that program it does this. So why would you rewrite all that code? Guess what you're going to do? Copy and paste John's code and use that. The boss is going to sit there and want to know, why are you trying to rewrite that code when it's right there? And so would it not make sense for we sometimes talk about the law of divine economy. God is not wasteful. Would it not make sense that God has a being over here that's going to be similar? They're still very different, but there's some similarities. And so he uses the same, if you want to use that illustration, the same code for this or for that. And so it's the same data, but a creationist and evolutionist, they're looking at it from a different standpoint. And so these things, understand, you can't take one particular argument and say, I can destroy evolution with this one argument. It's not going to happen. But looking at the composite picture, the difference in those data and how do we interpret that data? Creationist says, well, it shows one creator and he's efficient. So some things are going to be similar, but there are also a lot of differences. But then you put that together with morality, origin of life, origin of the earth, and things like that, and it's the big picture view that it's just the evidence is too overwhelming. God created it. Creationism, not evolution. Yes, sir.
Chad, it seems as though as time goes on, things start to break down. For instance, if I build a dog house out in Alabama, I don't go out in 20 years and it's some spectacular mansion. If anything, it's lesser than it was when it started. But look at this theory of evolution. Things started out simplified, and you see anything about the human heart and the complexities of it. Nothing else in the world works that way. It starts out, either complex,
Right.
and gets more complex. That's not the way it works.
It doesn't. And that's your, I don't have them up here. I thought I had them on there. That's your second law of thermodynamics, if I'm not mistaken. Some science person may have to correct me. I thought I had, wow, I really thought I had that on my sheet. But is it second, law of increasing entropy? So first law of thermodynamics is what? Matter can neither be created or destroyed, which is an interesting word study when you go to look at Genesis 1, where on the seventh day God rested. And sometimes we go, well, if he's God, why does he need to rest? When you start studying that Hebrew word, what it means is he ceased creating. And it's interesting because you study that further, and it actually means he stopped creating matter, which, lo and behold, fits perfectly with the first law of thermodynamics. You can't create matter. You can change its form. You could take a piece of wood and you can burn it in the fire, but guess what? You still got ashes and smoke and other things that may be given off from that. So you've changed its form, but you haven't destroyed it. You could take ice and you melt it, but now you got water. You didn't destroy matter. water evaporates, but it's not just destroyed. So matter can't be created, it can't be destroyed. That's the first law of thermodynamics. It goes right with, and I'm going to repeat this later because I'm sitting here and I can see myself typing it. I just don't remember where I put it in my notes. But so you're gonna see me repeat this somewhere because I know it's in here somewhere. But anyway, second law of thermodynamics is what we sometimes call, I've heard it called the law of increasing entropy, which just means basically what Tim was saying just a moment ago. Everything is, we may use the terminology, it's winding down. Some people use the illustration of a clock. You wind it, and if you leave it and you don't wind it anymore, guess what? Eventually it winds down and it stops. And so everything is also tending toward disorder. It's tending toward less usefulness, less usable matter, and so on and so forth. And so that's also the idea. Look at, I have to find the verse, Hebrews 1. Like I said, we're either going to run across this somewhere else that I can't either find at a glance here or can't remember, or I'm having a really, really strange case of deja vu. Hebrews chapter 1. He's quoting from the Psalms. Look at verse 10. Thou, Lord, in the beginning hast laid the foundation of the earth, and the heavens are the work of thine hands. So the earth and the heavens, that gets it all. They shall perish, but thou remainest. It's the eternality of God contrasted with the finite universe. They shall perish, but thou remainest, that they shall all wax old as doth a garment. And as a vesture shalt thou fold them up, and they shall be changed. But thou art the same, and thy years fail not. They wax old as a garment. Well, everybody knows you wear clothing and eventually it wears out. It'll become threadbare, or your jeans get holes in the knees or whatever. You eventually, if you wear clothing long enough, it's going to wear out. That's the nature of all things. As you pointed out, you don't build a doghouse and one day you come out and it's this amazing 100,000 square foot mansion. It's never going to happen. Give it 1,000,000 years, it'll still be sitting there as a doghouse, only it'll be rotten to the core and gone, because after that much time, everything would have happened to rot and, it'd be completely gone. Things wind down, and that's exactly what the Bible tells us about the earth. It's going to wax old like a garment. Things are winding down. That fits with the second law of thermodynamics. We know life comes from life. It doesn't just happen. And so again, the big picture, when you think about the harmony with the laws of thermodynamics, when you think about the harmony with the law of biogenesis, these aren't theories, these are laws, by the way, and I think any of us who've been to 7th or 8th grade science, we know the difference between a law and a theory. And it upsets me that evolution keeps getting put forth as some kind of a law, but it's not. It is and always will be the theory of evolution, and it's a wrong theory. But the law of biogenesis is a law. The laws of thermodynamics are laws. They always happen, which, by the way, is in and of itself evidence of a divine creator. The fact that it always happens every single time. It's repeatable. And guess what? You can do it 1,000 times. You can hold an object. If you want to, what was it, Newton, the guy that, the apple joke about the apple falling out of the tree, right? You could drop the apple a gazillion times, and guess what? Every single time here on this earth, barring, some kind of reversal that you put artificially, gravity's going to pull it down because it's the law of gravity. It's repeatable. It always happens. Isn't that amazing? How does it always happen that way every single time? Wouldn't that make more sense to understand that an intelligent mind put these laws in place that always work that way? So there are some questions that evolution can't answer. Those are just a few. If evolution is wrong, this is number 3 under lesson 2. Sometimes people want to know, well, if evolution is wrong, how can we explain the dinosaurs? I was smiling as I studied this one. I was thinking if Mr. Nicholas Wheeler was in here, he could tell us We could have him stand before us and lecture for hours because Nicholas knows about the dinosaurs. And I mean, he is sharp on that. And so every time I think about dinosaurs, I don't think I've ever known anyone as enthusiastic about the dinosaurs as Mr. Nicholas. He does, and you could talk to him, and it's pretty amazing, the stuff that he could tell you about these dinosaurs. But one of the questions that people want to know, and make no mistake about it, dinosaurs have become a pawn in this battle between creation and evolution. And scientists aren't dumb, and they know that children particularly are fascinated by dinosaurs. I mean, is there anybody in here that when you were a child and you learned about dinosaurs, you just thought, I mean, at least, I can't think of anybody. I mean, I'm thinking back to elementary school when we first learned about them, and even the girls in the class who maybe normally aren't into animals and stuff and all the exciting stuff that maybe the guys want, guys want action. We love to think about Tyrannosaurus Rex going and ripping something apart. But, dinosaurs are fascinating. And the scientists, these evolutionists, they've begun to use them as a pawn to try to, you believe in dinosaurs? You gotta believe in evolution then, because they just don't work with creationism. That's what they want us to believe. And so they use them to try to reach our children. Now, somebody might say, Chad, people would never do that. You look up some Bill Nye videos, who we thought when we were growing up was just Mr. Nice Guy. I mean, he's Bill Nye, the science guy. He's not going to lie to you. He's not going to try to tell you something that's not true. You look up some videos, and he will flat out say, it is dangerous to teach our children about creationism, and we need to get away from that. We've moved past that, and if you want to believe in that stuff, fine, but please don't mess up your children. We need them as scientists, and we need them, if we're going to have them as scientists, they've got to believe in evolution. And I read an article. It was one of the bigger magazines, Time or Newsweek, after the debate that he had with Ken Ham. And he said, it may have been leading up to the debate, but he said, we've got to get the children. We've got to get the children. And if we can get the children to stop believing in this nonsense called creationism, then we'll fix this problem of people believing that some God out there created the universe. That's Bill Nye, the science guy. I mean, I read it. And in fact, I read it while I was at PTP, and I went that same day, and I found Eric Lyons from Apologetics Press, and I said, you seen this? Have you seen this garbage? I said, I won't, I've said it here before, and I've said it to other people. I wasn't real thrilled with how Ken Ham turned out in that debate. I think he could have done a much better job. And so I told Eric, I said, one of you guys, I said, has Kyle seen this? Well, somebody who's going to do a better job defending the truth needs to go and talk to this guy and tell him, put your money where your mouth is. You want to talk about we got to destroy this. Well, let's get another public debate. And so dinosaurs, they're used as a pawn to try to help capture the hearts and imagination of children, and then to turn around and say, well, if you believe in them, then you just can't believe in the Bible, in God, in creationism. Yes, sir, you were going to say something, Bob?
One question for Bill Nye. If we do good apologetics, we should be able to answer Bill Nye. He said we should not be teaching creation to our children. Well, if he has a evolutionary worldview, when he says should, he's implying there's a right and a wrong. Well, the only way to have a right or a wrong is if there's a God that defines what is right and wrong. So he's assuming an ethical standard, but according to his own view of the world, there cannot be any ethical standard. So by him arguing against God, he has to assume God exists.
If you ever make any argument of something is right or wrong, something you should do or should not do, you're right. You have no, as we say in the South, you don't have a leg to stand on, because anything should not, right, wrong, has to be based on a standard. And so I could just as easily turn that back on Bill Nye, and I could say, well, you say I shouldn't teach my children that. Why not? Well, because it's dumb. Well, it's dumb to you. Maybe I think that's awesome to teach my children that, even if it's not true. I think I should just be able to teach my children whatever I want. Well, on what basis could anyone say if there's not a standard. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. There has to be a standard. And evolutionists use this all the time. They say, oh, that's not right. And they understand when it comes to weights, when it comes to measurements, there's a standard. And there are even this institute of standards where they actually have a kilogram. They actually have a gram. It is the official gram, kilogram, and so on. Meter, centimeter. They understand that. You got to have a standard. But when it comes to right and wrong, should not, morality type things, they can't answer it. So how do we answer this? So people say, well, how do you explain the dinosaurs then, Mr. Creationist? Dinosaur, of course, means terrible lizard. This is a phrase that was coined somewhere around 1842. And so, what people often say is, you don't read about dinosaurs in the Bible. You ever hear somebody say that? I mean, I grew up most of my life thinking that. Because I don't see dinosaur in the Bible. I can get out my little program, I can type in dinosaur, and guess what? No results found. But, I mean, let's be honest, the word is not in the Bible because it was coined in 1842. The King James Version came out when? 1611. A little bit of discrepancy there, a little difference. It predated the word. Try finding zebra in your Bible. Do you not believe in zebras? You say zebras and man could not coexist because, you can't believe in zebras if you believe in your Bible. There are a lot of words that aren't in the Bible. That doesn't mean that the concept isn't there. It's just maybe the word wasn't invented at that time. So that's not going to work. Dinosaurs and man were created on the same day. In 6 days the Lord made heaven, the earth, the sea, and all that in them is, Exodus 20:11. Genesis 1:24-26 records on day 6 God made animals, God made man. Guess what? That means the dinosaurs as well. But Chad, dinosaurs and man, they live thousands, millions of years apart. Well, that's what people say. Some of the scientists say that. But you know what they just observed the Passover on? When they're out there and they find a dinosaur footprint, and right smack dab in the middle of that footprint is, guess what? A human's footprint. Uh-oh. Now what? Folks, you cannot explain that if you say and maintain. Now, there are some honest scientists that they'll say, we don't know what to do with this. I mean, I've even read a couple of scientists who said, this messes up everything. And I thought, you know what, at least you're honest. They didn't say, you know what, that's it. I believe in the Bible, I'm no longer an evolutionist. But at least they said, wow, this is a monkey wrench in everything. Because, one of the very foundational elements of evolution is humans evolving way later than dinosaurs. And yet, here's this big, ginormous footprint, and there's a human footprint right in the middle of it. You can go to places. My friend Brent Rice has gone to Cambodia numerous times, and there's kind of an old temple type place there, and you could go in there and you can see drawings on the wall. And it's humans, and sometimes it's a man with a big long spear, and guess what he's doing? He's using that spear to try to hold off something that looks awfully like a dinosaur. I want to say a T-Rex, but I'm not sure. It may have been another kind of dinosaur. I said Tyrannosaurus Rex one time, and Nicholas corrected me. He said, no, you're talking about something. I don't even remember what it was, but he told me, and it was, and I thought, I kind of did some research on it, and man, if you're going to talk about dinosaurs around Nicholas, you got to get it right, because he'll correct you. But when I say he knows, I'm not kidding. He knows. But, these places where humans and dinosaurs are pictured interacting, concurrent, at the same time, how do you explain that? So don't buy this idea that humans evolved millions of years or thousands of years later. And the fact of the matter is the Bible does speak of dinosaurs. I've heard a few people just kind of flabbergasted, floored, and say, the Bible says what now, Chad? And I say, oh, yeah. And so I say, well, let's turn. I'll show you. Behemoth is one, and they're both in the book of Job. They're mentioned, Leviathan at least is mentioned in another place. I think Behemoth is too. But Job 40 and 41, Behemoth and Leviathan. Now, we're not going to go and read all those verses. You may just want to jot down the reference or put it there in your booklet and study that further. It's interesting, some of these modernists who have bought into the evolution lie, they'll put a footnote in their Bible. In fact, if somebody turns over there, if you have a Bible that has some footnotes in it, you may see a footnote. If you happen to see one, just holler at me, raise your hand or something. I'd be interested to know if somebody has a footnote there at Job 40. I don't know if I've ever looked. I haven't had this Bible all that long. I'm going to go look, see if I have one. Either one of these, sometimes they'll both have a particular footnote. And if it weren't so serious, it'd be hilarious. Anybody got one? I don't think I have a note in this Bible. Oh, yes I do. Anybody else got one? You got one in yours? What does it say? A large animal, exact identity unknown. Hey, that's better than a lot of them I've seen. What's yours got, Jacob? Basically that. Anybody else got something? I don't see anything on Leviathan. For Leviathan. Hey, that's better than a lot of stuff. I've got a note, and like I said, it doesn't do it for Leviathan, but on Job 40, verse 15, behold now Behemoth, which I made with thee, he eateth grass as an ox. I've got a note in mine that says hippopotamus. Elephant. That's a new one to me. You think the trunk would have made it in there in that description if it were an elephant. I mean, come on. I think hippopotamus will be more reasonable, except for, does anybody know what might make a hippopotamus an unlikely fella here? Where is it? Somebody help me out. I'm looking for it. 17. He moveth his tail like a cedar. I've told you before, but it's just one of those things I'll never forget if I live to be 100. Brother Cates telling us how some texts or Bibles versions would have a footnote there and say it was hippopotamus, and he'd say, have y'all ever seen a hippopotamus? His tail? That's a hippopotamus tail. It's a little squiggly, small thing. It's certainly not like a cedar tree. He moveth his tail like a cedar. Now, you think about a dinosaur, something similar to like a brontosaurus. Does that make some sense? Does that fit more? Isn't it amazing how sometimes people let the world try to interpret the Bible for us instead of just going with what the text says and looking and seeing, well, what makes the most sense here? Leviathan, some versions will have something about Leviathan saying it's a crocodile. I've seen that before. Anybody have anything about a crocodile for Leviathan? I'm trying to think if I've ever seen anything else besides crocodile. I don't think so. I don't think I'd ever heard elephant for behemoth. But anyway, again, crocodile, yes, sir.
It also talks about it in Psalms.
Psalms, yeah.
They talk about if it was something like a crocodile, it says it talks about the great sea and the wide sea and innumerable teeming things, living things, both great and small. There are ships that sail about, and there is that Leviathan which you have made to play there.
Yeah.
I've never seen a crocodile in the sea.
Yeah. There are saltwater crocodiles, but they don't live way out in the sea, And, I don't think I've ever seen it. I don't think I've ever heard of one. But, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure crocodiles don't breathe fire. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong on that. But this critter, Leviathan, he could breathe fire. His scales are his pride. Again, that doesn't really fit with a crocodile, does it? That was verse 16. Verse 19 says, out of his mouth go burning lamps, and sparks of fire leap out. Out of his nostrils goeth smoke, as out of a seething pot or cauldron. I remember Bert Thompson sometimes lecturing about his dad, who was a veterinarian. Sometimes a cow would get very sick, and his dad would go out, and he'd go out with him just as a boy, and the dad would say, his dad would tell him, say, this cow has very, very sick with gas. And he could put some kind of contraption, it was like a needle. And what he would do is he could insert that thing, and he said Dad would just sit there, and then he would take a lighter and just go, and you know what happened then? He said, whoo, and that solves the problem. Remove that thing, cow just gets up and goes on her way. Now, you think about that, gas is so flammable, so what you need is a spark. A lot of these animals, they have rocks that they'll swallow and things like that, or all you need is a spark. And so sometimes people say, oh, Chad, are you really trying to tell me you believe this Leviathan thing breathed fire? Somebody might say, now I'm less inclined to believe the Bible. Well, it's not unscientific at all. It's very, very doable. All you need is that spark. Sometimes people say, well, all right, let's just suppose for a minute these are dinosaurs and that dinosaurs and humans live together. How do you think man is going to survive with dinosaurs on the earth? I mean, these monsters, these humongous beasts, how could man survive? My answer to that is, well, first of all, not all of them were huge, and not all of them were carnivores. There's some that were very docile and smaller critters. But here's the thing. How does man survive today around huge beasts? Are there dangerous creatures on the face of the earth today? You better believe it. How does man survive around them? Does man just go, oh, don't go that place. There are dangerous beasts there. And in fact, a lot of times throughout history, what mankind has said is, right or wrong, whether how you feel about it, a lot of times they say, we're going to go in and we're going to tame this beast, or we're going to go in and we're going to hunt it. And by the way, there have been some ancient wall drawings of people, what appeared to be a hunting party going after dinosaurs. Maybe for the skin, maybe for meat, maybe for sport, who knows. But, I mean, how do people survive today around huge beasts? It's a little word called dominion. God gave man dominion over the animals. And you know what? Some of them are very intelligent, and Jurassic Park scares us to death because those crazy, what do you call them, velociraptors, and they're so smart and intelligent. But, that may be Hollywood, and it may make a scary, movie. That used to just terrify me, thinking about how intelligent those velociraptors were, and they're going to, if that could ever happen. But man has dominion over the animals. And man is over God's creation. That's how man lived concurrent with the dinosaurs. Same way he lives today with huge beasts. What happened to the dinosaurs? Well, I mean, we know they went extinct. There are a lot of theories we could give. What's probably the number one cause of their demise? The flood, obviously. There would have been 2 of them on the ark. By the way, sometimes people say, hold the phone. Did you just say 2 of each dinosaur on the ark? Noah took 2 T-Rexes on the ark. Yeah? And somebody says, all right, you know what? You might have had me up to that point, but I'm done. I'm out on that. What's the answer? Somebody says, Noah. Did I say Moses a while ago too? Noah, I know who built the ark. Noah, somebody's going to pull this up on YouTube and go, who is this guy? Somebody says, Noah took 2 brontosauruses on the ark. What's the answer, Bob? You said it just a second ago. Nobody said he took full-grown ones. God's not dumb. Noah's not dumb. You don't take 2 full-grown T-Rexes on the ark, but you could take little babies. And there are all kind of other things that we could speculate that we're just not told. It may be that God made a lot of these creatures go into like a hibernation, because they were on the ark for about a year. And so they're probably something like that in it as well. But, probably the flood got most of the dinosaurs. And then what the flood didn't get, conditions after the flood were probably not very favorable for them. But it's interesting, I think Rob mentioned this last week, that, there have been dinosaur remains found on every single continent. And a lot of the breaking up during the flood and all that. So a lot of the dinosaurs found themselves in a climate that just was not conducive toward their survival. Yes, ma'am? Yes. And that's one of the ways we can date the book of Job, is it had to have occurred shortly after the flood, because you do still have dinosaurs. And it seems that they disappeared pretty shortly after the flood. But, right. Some people ask this question, though, like in and of itself, it's an argument against the existence of dinosaurs concurrent with man. They'll say, oh yeah? Well, how did the dinosaurs become extinct? Well, I don't know. I don't have to know that to believe in the Bible. How did the dodo bird become extinct? Doesn't affect my belief in the Bible. I mean, that's irrelevant. So sometimes people say things that are just, they don't make any sense, and it doesn't have any bearing one way or the other on the discussion. So we don't really know what happened to them, other than more than likely conditions after the flood, within the flood itself, and then after the flood, it just wasn't conducive to them surviving. Sometimes people say, why can't I just believe in both the Bible and evolution? It's like trying to pull for Alabama and Auburn. You can't do that. It's I don't know what's Miss Janice got on to me Sunday. She said, you got to start using Georgia illustrations when you talk football. So who's Georgia's biggest rival? Somebody? Georgia Tech. Okay, yeah, it's like trying to say I pull for Georgia and Georgia Tech. So is Bride in here? Okay. But sometimes people say, why can't I believe in both? And all jokes aside, they're fundamentally opposite. And I know people sometimes are trying to look for a way to get along with everyone, but it's kind of like the fellow during the Civil War that he didn't really want to fight for the North, he didn't really want to fight for the South, and so he said, I'm going to put on a gray coat, and I'm going to put on blue trousers, a Confederate top, Union bottom, and guess what? You know what happened? He got shot at by both sides. That's what happens when you are what sometimes people call a theistic evolutionist. It's a compromise at its core. But there's some problems. It just won't work. The Bible says Adam was the first man. Is that pretty clear in the Bible? You better believe it. I mean, Genesis 1, 1 Corinthians 15:45, you have a New Testament writer thousands of years later saying Adam was the first man. Guess what evolution says? No, Adam wasn't the first man. That's just those 11 chapters of Genesis, they're mythical. They're allegorical. There was no Adam, and he certainly was not the first man. Lucy or Australopithecus or you name it. Whoever they've come up with lately is the first man or the first woman. But the Bible's pretty clear. Adam and Eve, the first man and woman. Now, you reconcile those two positions. You can't. Here's another thing. How do you explain Eve? Evolution says that the difference in the sexes, they just evolved. And yet the Bible's pretty clear. God caused a deep sleep to fall on Adam. He took one of his ribs and he made woman. In fact, Adam called her woman because she was taken from man. How do you believe both of those? How do you reconcile that? You can't do it. Next, how do you explain the soul? Evolution says you don't have a soul. I was reading a website today, looking ahead toward lesson 3, questions about the Bible. And in fact, one of the things that people will say, atheistic people, they'll say when you destroy the Bible, once we prove the Bible is just written by men and it's not some kind of thing, divine inspired message from heaven, once you've done that, everything else, it's just a matter of time before people will fall away. And so make no mistake, there's a concerted effort to attack the integrity of the Bible, which is in itself evidence of the Bible's inspiration. It's not like people haven't been trying to take it down for a long, long time now. Unsuccessfully, over and over again. The old saying goes, the Bible is the anvil that has worn out many a hammer. I mean, you can see the worn out hammers laying at the blacksmith's feet. There's the anvil. How many hammers have you gone through over the years? Oh, I don't know. Many, many hammers. How many anvils? Just the one. The Bible is the anvil that wears out the hammers of the atheists, the skeptics. But one of the things they say is, we now know, we have educated ourselves, and how you think and feel and what you choose, choice and morality and all that, we've linked it. We understand now how neurons fire and all that, which is a joke in itself. No, we don't understand that. We may figure out that, okay, here's a neuron firing and that's part of the thought process, but let's not kid ourselves and say we understand it. You talk about presumptuous. Think about all the things we don't understand about the human brain. But people say, the religionists will say you have a soul, and that's why you have morality and you make choices. Oh, it's just a bunch of neurons firing. Now, that's what evolution says. But yet, here's a person who says, I'm a theistic evolutionist. I believe in God. But I believe he used evolution to make things. Okay, where did man get a soul? Did it evolve into him? Well, no, I believe God put the soul in at one point. There come the guns from the atheists. You believe who put the soul in there? There is no God. That's what they're going to say. And so they're going to start firing with both barrels because you just said God put the soul in. Not only that, when you say God put the soul in, guess what that requires? A creator, but a miracle. That's not going to jive with evolution. And so now the evolutionist is upset because you said God and you included a miracle in that. And so, again, it's a compromise. It's just not going to work. The Bible's clear, though. God placed in man a soul. And we sometimes, I heard somebody say this again recently, and I say it a lot too. We say we have a soul. Humans are the only creature God created that has a soul. But really, I think it's more accurate to state we are a soul. I am a soul. My soul has a body. I don't really have a soul per se. I have a body. And so I think we understand that, and we're not trying to parse words, but I think that's a good point. Yes, sir.
The Bible says that man became a living soul. So you say, so what? Well, the Bible has stood the test of time. And the things that it said were some of these agnostic humanists and evolutionists know. Most of them are fly by night.
Right. And you can't, this compromise to try to believe in, God and evolution, it just won't work, just if nothing else but because of the soul. Man became a living soul. The Bible's pretty clear about that. And you can't reconcile that to evolution. Non-theistic evolutionists won't go for a miraculous creation. Evolution is based on uniformitarianism. If God intervenes at any point, that is catastrophism. And the compromise, it's out. The compromise is gone. What about the fall of man? You can't harmonize this with theistic beliefs and with evolution. Evolution says man started at the bottom and slowly evolved. Guess what God says in the Bible? Man started out perfect at the very top, and he fell. He fell from grace. Uniformitarianism, evolution, catastrophism is taught over and over again in the Bible. Evolution is based on, it depends on, its very foundation, its very lifeblood is, everything has always been like it is now, and it always will be that way. Processes of erosion, they will always be like they are now. They always have been. And that's why they'll look at the Grand Canyon and not even think about flood conditions, a worldwide flood that would easily have carved a gorge like that. They think, wow, the Colorado River running as it is right now, and that would take millions of years to carve a gorge like that, a canyon. That's uniformitarianism, and evolution depends on it, but the Bible is against it 100%. You cannot reconcile passages like Genesis 1:5, Exodus 20:11 with the idea of evolution taking millions of years. And the bottom line is, you cannot believe in evolution and believe Jesus is Lord. You're going to say Jesus was mistaken, and if he made a mistake, guess what? He's not God in the flesh. So theistic evolution is a compromise, and it just won't work. Next week, we'll finish up this with how can we show the Bible and genuine science don't contradict, and then we'll move into questions about the Bible. Again, people are trying to destroy the Bible. If they can do that, they know, then they've destroyed all faith. The fact of God's existence, knowing how to live as God would have us live depends on is the Bible from God. Thank you very much.